All right, welcome everybody. We're going to give everybody a chance to just kind of filter in here a few minutes to get settled in. We had a lot of signups today, which was really exciting because we have two heavy hitters in the room tonight, so which is awesome. Heavy hitters, that's right. Okay, my name is Ruth Sapin. Welcome. I'm a pipeline executive, and this is Mr. Matt Misitich over here, who's going to be joining as a moderator tonight. And we have producer Sandra Leviton and producer Beth Bruckner O'Brien as well here joining us tonight. You are in Symposium's Hard Truth series, which we'd love to bring you guys what producers actually want. It's a mystery.
They don't even know.
We're excited for this tonight. Okay, I think we're filtering people in here. And I'm going to go ahead and read through the bios, and we'll jump directly into questions. Just so everybody is aware, a little housekeeping going on. This is going to be about a 2-hour session, just a very casual conversation where Matt and I have the opportunity to just ask a ton of questions. So for those who are ready, please filter all of your questions into the Q&A menu over there so that we can keep track of them, make sure that they're answered, or we can get to as many as we possibly can. And we also have the chat over here for just casual conversation. I'll enable it for everybody here, which we should be good to go. Okay. All right. Let's get started. Okay, I'm going to start with Beth. Beth is a writer, producer, and entertainment executive who has worked on 36 films during her career. Previously, as the SVP of Development and Production at Solstice Studios between 2018 and 2021, Beth executive produced Robert Rodriguez's Hypnotic, starring Ben Affleck, as well as co-produced the film Unhinged, starring Russell Crowe. That was a really good one. I enjoyed that a lot. And currently, Beth is developing and packaging a slate of films as an independent producer, including The Nest, a domestic violence thriller Beth wrote with Halle Berry's production company, Holly Jester, on board to produce. She is also producing the film adaptation of the best-selling book On a Quiet Street by Serafina Nova Glass. Beth also teaches the business of screenwriting and producing at UCLA and USC's Cinematic Schools of Arts.
Thank you,
Thank you, Beth, for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ruth, for that intro. That was lovely.
Well, it helps whenever you have it all written down, you know, so that I can kind of read it like a script. And I'm going to move over to Sandra Leviton, who a Tribeca Film Institute alum. Sandra is a Los Angeles-based producer and writer for Under the Stars Entertainment. She produces the 2022 film Student Body, released by, was it 1091 Pictures this past February. The film was directed by Leanne Kerr and is available on Showtime. You guys should check it out. Her previous film, Zone 2, stars Anne Ramsey, and after playing at the top of genre festivals, including Screamfest, going on a world tour with Etheria, Zone 2 is now available on Shudder and Amazon in the Etheria series. And prior to Under the Stars Entertainment, Sandra spent 5 years working in development and current programming at FX, working on over 20 original series, including American Horror Story, Sons of Anarchy, and many others, all of which are pretty much my favorite shows. So I'm pretty excited about that. And in addition to writing and producing, Sandra is a mentor and educator for colleges, writing conferences, film festivals, and nonprofit organizations. And we're very thankful she is here tonight. Thank you, Sandra, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, I think that launches us. Matt, do you want to hit us off here?
Yeah, not producing question related. I just wanted to kind of throw something out there for everyone who is attending live. So if you had planned on entering the 2023 script pipeline seasons or the 2022 first look project, which is ending soon on the 30th, I'm going to drop a little code in the chat box for a lower entry fee rate. So I'll just drop the details there now. And I wanted to mention it because I know some people won't be able to stay for the whole thing, but I'll mention it again too, regardless. That has been the intermission part of this, and we can get started now.
Perfect.
In fact, Ruth, there's a question that we could fire away with right away.
Okay.
If we want to jump right into it. It's a big question to start with. Do producers really want something fresh, or are we going to see the continuing trend of remakes and sequels forever? She didn't say forever,
Man.
but I'm adding forever. And we can start with Sandra. I'll just kick it to her first and then over to Beth.
No, it's a combination of both, honestly. And there's room in the marketplace for both. I mean, big studios, yeah, they want IP. You know, producers, yeah, of course, if you come along with IP, like, of course we want it. But, you know, originality is really what keeps this industry going and like the lifeblood of what we do. Who doesn't want to discover the next, you know, Paranormal Activity? Who doesn't want to discover the next, you know, Harry Potter? I mean, even if you look at, and especially this time of year, you know, Halloween and genre movies, originality is always fantastic because we always want a good franchise. But even then, like, if you look at even like box office for the last 2 weekends, what was #1? It was Smile, which is an original project. So, you know, it's not dead. And, you know, without fresh ideas, we can't do what we do. And there's different, you know, I think levels of producers, and different producers look for different things. But IP is always great, but originality, that's something you can get behind and champion. You know, it's why we do what we do. Beth, I'm sure you have a lot more to say on that, on the feature side particularly.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked on both franchises and original material, and I've turned original specs into franchises. Hitman's Bodyguard was an original spec that was a pretty high concept. What if a hitman needed a bodyguard? Why would a hitman need a bodyguard? So that turned into a franchise because it worked once, and people like to capitalize off things that work, right? So I think that exactly what you said is correct. We want IP. We also want a new, fresh idea that makes us go, ooh, I don't think that's been done yet. Anytime someone can make me go, ooh, that's, man, we all look for that moment.
That's the hook, right?
That's the hook. Exactly.
I like that.
Sure.
If I could pull back just for a second here, let's come to a 60,000 foot level for people who are attending here. I mean, you ladies, I mean, you're producers, right? So what, by your definition, what does a producer do? What is a job of a producer? If we're going to really pull back and through the lens of a producer, because there's many different kinds of producers, right? I mean, that do different kinds of jobs. So define your job for us and tell us what you do exactly in the entertainment industry.
Do you want to go first?
Oh no, you go first on this one.
So there are many kinds of producers. A lot of producers specialize in the finance end of things or in the physical production end of things, doing the actual schedule and budget. And don't get me wrong, I think Sandra or I could probably do those kinds of producing jobs, but we're more on the creative side. We like to source material, whether that's working with writers from original ideas or working from IP. We develop those projects with the writers into a script that we can take into the marketplace and package. When I say package, it means attaching elements that will make the entire project more enticing to the buyer, right? So you bring on a director that directed some cool movie, and all of a sudden that is a more enticing package for the buyer. Or you bring on a piece of talent and that becomes a more enticing package for the buyer. Once we've actually sold it, then we have to like go make it. And so that includes supervising the set, making sure all of the creative touchstones are there, as well as doing the project on time and within a budget. Also maintaining lots of different personalities on set. As I'm sure everyone can imagine, no one goes into this business because they have no ego. So there's a lot of differences of opinion we need to come in between. And then in post, you're working with the editor and the director to create the best cut. You're trying to find a home for that, unless you found a home for it up front. So then you're actually screening it at film festivals and for distributors. It's kind of soup to nuts. You're involved in the entire process from the creation all the way through the delivery.
You're the boots on the ground with every phase, it sounds like.
Yeah, like if you lost faith in the project, it probably wouldn't get done without you.
Yeah, I think you know, I think Beth sums it up super well. You know, like, you know, these are, you know, not just you know, you as writers, it's your babies, it's our babies too. And, you know, when we commit to a project that we can get made, that's a lifetime commitment. And particularly as an independent producer, it's a lifetime commitment. And so, you know, we really do everything from, like Beth was saying, like bringing in the creative and working on the script to, you know, packaging it. But, you know, we also do everything from legal. We do, you know, if you're on set, you're doing everything from even taking care of people's foods needs and safety requirements. And, you know, it's really, you know, yours, and it's your ownership over the project, and, you know, doing everything in your power that you can to make it the best film that it can be, and finding the best partners to work with. And, you know, I'll add too, on the TV side, it's a little bit different as a producer, because oftentimes in TV, as a producer, you're also the writer or potentially the showrunner or the creator. And that has a whole different function, a different type of ecosystem that you're dealing with as well, which is probably a whole other conversation. But in very similar ways, you know, as the creator, as the showrunner, as a high-level producer on a series, you know, it's up to you to maintain the creative of the show. You're overseeing, you know, cast and crew, oftentimes of, you know, the size of a huge feature, you know, 350 people on a production, making sure that creatively everything works and has the same voice, working with the studios and the networks, and, you know, making sure that everything from, you know, making sure the actors and the characters are, you know, doing what they need to do and are happy, and, you know, works the storyline. But also then you're also dealing with, you know, advertising and product placement. You're dealing with oftentimes, you know, marketing. You're dealing with every little piece of it, essentially, when you're a showrunner or you're, you know, the top person on a show as a producer. You're basically running a mini corporation. It's really similar in film in that way, but you have the extra added responsibility that you're also probably the writer as well. Not always the case, you know, and again, like Beth was saying, there's many different types of producers. That does happen in TV, but generally speaking, you are also the creative voice leading the show on top of doing all of these things. And so there's a different level of you know, time, different level of commitment, and a different type of support system too, because of just the ecosystem of TV.
Wow. That was really good. I think we have we're oriented now in the producer's head, which is great. So
I'm stressed out just listening to all that.
But
really good multitaskers is really what it comes
there we
down to.
go.
Like if you're a natural multitasker,
yes,
then you're a natural producer.
Stress
Well,
management, all that. You guys are experts at all that. So.
not only that too, but this is harped on all the time, but like, you have to work well with people. You have to be able to communicate with people. You have to be able to be open-minded, to be flexible, to adapt to a number of personalities, while, you know, maintaining your own personality, right? So there's just so much that is involved there. Why do producers get paid so much is the answer. To answer that question, say.
I'd like to stop that rumor right now.
I know, and they don't get paid that much.
Like actually, guys.
Like actually, look, there's a number of producers who do get paid very, very well. The rest of the producers do not. You get paid in, you know, when the film gets financed, or, you know, a show actually goes to series. Oftentimes you're the last person paid and you're the first person in. So it really depends. And if there is, you know, particularly in the independent world, if you are looking for more money to put towards something on screen or to take care of somebody or something, the first, you know, paycheck to get cut is the producer's paycheck. You're the last person to get paid, really, oftentimes. And it really, again, as there's different variations of producers, there's variations of pay. You know, and if you're a big studio producer and you have a nice fancy pod with an overall deal, you're getting paid well. But majority of producers are independent, and majority of them actually are probably further in debt because they're putting their own money, their own time, and their own sweat equity, and they're the last people to get paid. So, you know,
nobody asked that question. I was just joking, actually, but I'm actually glad I asked.
But I think it's a really important
answer.
It's a
No,
really
that
Oh, yeah.
important thing to
because
talk
it,
about.
it goes to show
Yeah,
that
yeah,
you
yeah.
have to be very passionate, you know,
It
about the
does.
project that you're because you're putting not only, you know, your creative, you know, effort, like you said, your life and years behind it, but you're putting some financial, like, you know, like angst or whatever, you know, behind the project. I mean, that's something you don't hear that.
Well, it's one, yeah, I mean, one of the things that, you know, I know that you had both mentioned previously when we communicated was like, what are the things we want writers to know?
Mhm.
And one of the things that I had been thinking about and talking about is, you know, as you're deciding to work with people and, you know, producers to work with and people you want to entrust, and so much of it more is the passion and the people who you can work with on a daily basis. And I can get more into some of that later. But what this comes down to is that a lot of the producers really don't have lots of money. They're not getting paid the big
Mhm.
dollars in the same way. And so oftentimes as a writer looking for producers, what you really want is somebody who is going to be passionate and put in the sweat equity to your project. And that can sometimes mean more than somebody writing you, you know, a paycheck or, you know, that option money. And that's
Mhm.
why I think, you know, and you hear a lot of writers complaining about it, but you do get like those dollar options. And that's because that producer who's throwing their weight behind it
Yeah.
is putting in, you know, all of their time, their energy, the money, you know, and not just in terms of, you know, paying a writer, paying other people, but there's so much more work that goes into getting a project made that comes out of our own pockets as well. And we still have bills to pay. And we're often the last ones, but for
Yeah.
writers, it's finding the producer who's going to be the most passionate about your project. And so
Mhm.
I know it started as a joke, but that I think is a really important thing because everyone does have this misconception that if you are a producer, you're rolling in the dollars.
Yeah, you get the big bucks, right?
Right.
So, and
No,
Beth, I'm
That
sure you have
that's a
plenty to
good.
add to that too.
No, I wanted
Yeah,
to
Beth,
add
go
just
for it.
one thing, just because development on average, I think the number is like it takes 7 years to get a movie made. And producers really only get paid once the movie gets made. So there are years of development, of finding that material, of honing that material, of attaching the right elements before we take it into a buyer. And those years are just completely done on spec. There's spec
Mhm.
for us, hoping that we'll make a sale. So it is important when you're a writer and you have interest from a producer, what they're putting in is potentially years of their labor and emotion and passion and their network and everything else. And that is definitely not something to snuff at.
Yeah, and
Right.
that's not to say like don't get paid, because you know Beth and I are both writers ourselves, and we definitely believe in getting paid, and we definitely believe in paying writers as we can. But as independent producers, that's not always the best option. Now, obviously, if you're going to like Disney, like
Go
get
to
paid,
Disney.
you know, get paid, take that money, but you know, be reasonable and think about what your real goals are with your projects, you know, and find people who align with those goals and those passions, and that will pay back tenfold in whatever way that may be.
I think I can bundle a bunch of questions here because this will be a good segue from all of that. Knowing that a producer is likely going to invest years of their life into a single project that may or may not get made, by the way, and even if it does get made, that's even more years, right? Because then you're promoting it, it's distributed and so forth. What are the parameters? Like when you get a script, what are you really looking for?
Yeah.
Regardless of genre, like and it's gonna be very subjective, but what's that little core that's gonna get you excited to go and spend that time?
I'm going to get excited about irony in a concept. I'm going to get excited about a character put into a situation that is inherently ironic and or rife for conflict. I want to like hear the concept and just lean in. That's like primarily what I'm looking for, because people will send me log lines all day long. I'll get log lines from, you know, a writer, I'll get log lines from a director, whatever. And it's like, that's the first step. And if the log line doesn't pop out as something that's, oh, what does that mean? And like, it's interesting, it makes me lean in, then I don't really want to move that much further from that point.
Okay.
I think to add to that too, you know, I like, originality. I like things that are, interesting, so coming back to our original question, but I love originality. I mean, obviously come to me with IP, but I love originality and something that I haven't seen before. We read so much stuff. We've seen so much stuff. It's like, oh God, everything's been done. But if you have something that like really makes us like sit up and we're like, oh, this is really interesting, or oh, this is really, has a commercial element, something that we think that we maybe we know some people who might want to, invest in this, or a studio that might be looking for this particular thing. So those are things we pay attention to. But once we have the script, in our hands, for me, it's keeping me interested. And, I hate to say, like, people read, 5 pages and put it to the side, but I'm sorry, if you can't keep me interested for 5 pages, then that is a problem, because you're not going to keep someone interested on screen for 5 pages, or 5 minutes. And, look, if you go to a theater, we've lost the ability that, like, when you decide to go to a theater, you have purchased the ticket, you have made the decision, and you're committed to sitting there for, hour and a half, 2 hours. We've lost that with streaming. We never had that in TV, so it's always, keeping that interest. So if you can make me keep turning the page and other things can't distract me, then I'm very interested, because if that works for me, and, too much information, but I'm ADHD. So if you can keep my interest, then you can keep other people's interest. And that is so important, because once you get past the level of us as producers and we've gotten behind the project, we now have to make sure that that's a page turner for every executive, every financier, every maybe distributor or sales agent or actor or director or whoever else we bring into that project. They need to make sure that it's a page turner, and they want to put their weight behind it. And so if you can't keep our interest, then you're kind of dead in the water.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
even from our position, sorry, with that, even from our position, when I send something to Beth, I want to only send her stuff that, like, I'm really, really excited to pitch, and yeah, it just makes the pitch so much easier when you're like, you can see the whole movie in like a sentence, right? Not every great script is like that. It takes a little bit more, finessing and framing, but yeah, it's just super important to infuse that sort of level of originality to get anybody's attention. Film or TV. I was going to skip to another question, but Ruth, you were going to say.
Well, both of you have mentioned a couple times getting a script into your hand, and I'm seeing a lot of questions popping over here into the chat. Is how do I do that? Yeah. How does the writer get a script into your hands as a producer? What are the avenues that they have to take? What are the avenues they cannot take? Could you give us a little bit of that world? Yeah.
Andrew, you want to go?
Sure. There's a couple different avenues, and I want to preface this with every producer is different, just like every agent and manager is different in how they work. For myself personally, I like recommendations from other people. So I will always say, like, talk to your friends, make sure people know that you're writing, make sure that, as they say, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So, like, people want to genuinely help. I think I find in this industry, but they can't help you if they don't know what you're looking for. So talk to your friends, so I'm all about introductions and recommendations. But that said, I've also pitch fests. I've done, I was on virtual pitch fest for a while, so I would get things through there. I used to be very, very active on Twitter. I left it about 2 years ago just because it was getting a little much.
Maybe
but
wise.
Some of the projects that I've honestly, taken on, I've found them on Twitter. I've found them through friends, cold emails, through managers, through agents, other friends. So I think, and said everyone is different. There are some producers who will only go through representatives, and that's a very specific thing to them personally. We do have to be careful for legal reasons, emotional reasons, safety reasons, that we just can't necessarily take every email and have that go through. So we prefer or at least I personally, prefer ways that have a little bit of a barrier, just because I have dealt with some very scary situations in the past, and particularly as women, we have to take the extra precaution with that.
Yeah.
But that said, recommendations and friends and introductions are always the first step, I think, for anybody. And it doesn't matter whether, you live in LA, New York, or, anywhere else in the country. We're so virtual now that there's no reason why you can't find people to talk to who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody.
Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of the scripts that I get are from agents and managers. I also get a lot of cold emails. I don't necessarily respond to any of those because of the legality issues. I don't want to be developing a project and have a writer who I am not familiar with email me and say, I have a project and it's similar in concept to a project I have. I don't want to deal with any legal ramifications from reading material from unsolicited writers. But as Sandra said, Sandra and I have both spent the last, I don't even know, 13 years networking and meeting a million people. And what is often left unsaid with regards to how to create a successful writing career in this town is that 1/4 of your work should be networking. That sounds absolutely like a high number, I'm sure, to writers, but it is so important that you make those connections, whether it's with your writing group, whether it's with, assistants in the entertainment industry that are about to get promoted to becoming an agent or something like that. Like, those are the people that you need to know as a writer. You need to know people to be able to get your own work, because an agent and a manager is not always going to be your best source of connections. It's going to be primarily you putting yourself out there.
I think what some people are probably thinking right now, though, when they hear that, you're absolutely right. Totally agree. And it's probably, I think your percentage is actually spot on too. It's about 25% of your time should be spent doing that. But, Jane Ryder would probably ask, Jane Ryder's not an actual person. I made her up. But she's probably asking,
She's
well,
so talented.
She is so good. Anyway.
She's awesome.
This person is probably asking, okay, I want to do that. How do I do that? How do I meet a lit agent or not a lit agent, or a lit agent, or a manager or an assistant in development, or someone who's like at a company without it feeling like I'm just using them for a contact? Like, how do you make that happen organically?
So this is something I talk about a lot with my mentees and when I do, symposiums like this. And I like to address it in the way of, look, if you're naturally in a city like LA or New York, it's a lot easier, because you'll run into them in line at Starbucks. You have so many events and screenings and Q&As and birthday parties. You're going to meet people. Not everyone at this moment in time can, make it to one of these cities. And so I say, find those virtual groups. There are wonderful, wonderful communities of writers, both professional, all the way from professional to just starting out, who are online, who love engaging in these things. So like places on social media, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, there are wonderful communities. And trust me, you'll find them pretty easily. And especially if you heard, I'm sure, some of your past symposiums, I know some of your guests are very active in those spaces. But
Twitter mostly.
Yeah, Twitter mostly. They're very, very, people are generally very responsive, and that's a place to start. That said, organizations like you guys, and I know there's a number of other ones out there, are also great ways, because you have Q&As, you have virtual events, and you have places where you can start talking and meeting people. There's a lot of those, film festivals, again, your local film festival, if you can go in person, or if not, a lot of them are still doing things virtually. So take advantage of those opportunities, because you'll meet not just other, producers and directors and execs who go to these things, but you're also going to meet other writers, and you're going to meet other directors, and those are in other producers who may also just be starting out in their careers. Those are the people that you're really going to start connect with, and you all kind of just rise together, and you don't know who they know. So that other writer that maybe you met at a festival in like Omaha, Nebraska, well, they might have had a film that got made, or maybe they are represented somewhere, or whatever that is, and then they'll recommend you to the next person. And so, so much of it is just not being afraid to interact and talk with people, whether it's in real life or virtually. So I think that's the first step to being able to do all of that, because it's such a small community, no matter how you look at it. All roads eventually lead to a lot of the similar places and people.
I will add just a couple more things. I do read contest and screenplay competitions and read those scripts and reach out to those writers, some of whom I've met on Script Pipeline. Also, depending on your age and what stage you are in your career, interning in the entertainment industry is a really great way to network. You meet a boss, you hopefully target somewhere that does the kind of material that you jive with, so that you could potentially write something for them in the future and network that way with all the other fellow assistants and interns. And yeah, it's not exactly the most natural thing to network with so many people and have so many kind of blind dates, but it is kind of how it works. And so, just pretend like you like it and get on with it.
Yeah, and honestly, just treat everybody as, as humans, because like it can be a little, it is a little disconcerting if we're, out at a party or an event or film festival or wherever, and immediately someone's like, read my script, or I have this. And, that I can tell you right now, very rarely ever works. Has it worked? Yeah, but rarely works. Get to know people. The more you get to know people, like, you have to play the long game versus the short game. Like, if you want a sustainable career, it's a long game. And so get to know people as people, find out what they're interested in. At a very basic level, like, we all know that, we're all using each other in a way, but at the same time, we also form genuine friendships, and that's how things get made, because people want to work with you because they like you as a person, and you happen to have the material that backs that up. So if you meet someone in 5 minutes, unless there's like a specific thing that you're at, like a pitch fest or something, makes total sense. Yeah, read my script. But if you're in a more of a social situation, get to know people, watch their work, have something to talk about, see what they're doing, do your homework, and just connect with people, because it might be that it's not even that project or that thing that you connect with, but maybe it's because you both love mini golf and that just happened to come up in conversation, and that spawns a friendship. Weirder things have happened.
Should we go to mini golf, Sandra?
Actually, yes, number one. And I actually used to, when I first left the network, I did like a lot of script consulting, and I had a company similar to Pipeline, but way smaller. And I used to run events. And what I would do is I would bring like working writers, producers, execs. I'd just bring my friends out, and I'd be like, all right, we're going mini golfing or bowling. And I'd bring out, I'd have people sign up and bring out emerging, young writers. And I'd have like a few rules. I'd be like, you're not allowed to pitch. You're not allowed to do this. You'd have teams of 5 or 6 people and just go and talk and get to know each other. And so they'd have an activity, because look, I'm not someone who does well in like a big networking room. I'm the first to admit that. But if I have something to talk to with people, like an activity, I do really well. And I know a lot of writers are the same way. You're naturally generally more introverted. That's why we write. And so having that base of connection and not having the pressure of pitching or asking for a read or asking for a meeting makes both you and whoever you're with more comfortable. And a lot of people got jobs, whether it was assistant jobs or they did get reads and they did get meetings, because they formed a friendship, or they would be pitching to that same person they played mini golf with 5 years later. So those things, I think, are really, really important, and those form the bonds that actually do get things done, is by connecting as humans. So yes, we should go mini golfing.
Perfect.
That's the answer to that question.
Such good advice for every writer, because you ask, how do you network? And the answer is, you have to invite a bunch of people and plan things. And inevitably with that also comes the disappointment when only a percentage of them show up. And there's so much effort and rejection going into networking that more power to you. I love that mini golf idea.
Super fun.
Well, look, before we move on to the next question, I don't want to invite myself to mini golf. I'm just saying that I feel I would be a benefit. I mean, I would bring my own putter. I'd be that guy.
Oh,
Okay.
don't be
I would be a
that.
benefit to any competitive situation. Just marinate on it for a second.
What's your handicap, Matt? What's your handicap? Because if it's above a certain level, you
Pre-pandemic,
can't,
I was
you
a
can't mini
2.
golf.
Oh, I don't know what my mini golf handicap is. It's probably way up there. I don't know. Ruth, you want to grab another question from the list?
Well, I
have-
was just curious on this level, like producers, like you said, mentioned, you have to pull in different elements and a lot of different people onto a project, like these attachments, it's a very big word for writers. Is like, if you feel like you get a writer, if a writer gets a producer attached or a director attached or talent attached, it's this idea that you can kind of give wings to a project and it kind of lifts it up, out of obscurity, or it becomes more of an attractive package, what you were mentioning. So for producers, I mean, I imagine that a lot of your time is probably oriented around, finding these kinds of attachments. And how do you go about doing that? Is that just through the networking circles that you've established up to this point in your career, or do you just reach out cold sometimes to potential talent or directors that might be a good fit? Like, how does that whole system work for you guys?
I'll take it.
Go for it.
I just want to, so for every project that I decide to produce, I make a giant spreadsheet. I make a giant spreadsheet of comparable films, who produced those films, the companies that finance those films, what actors starred in those films, right? So that's my first list. And then I make a cast list for the actual project with high level cast. We're talking financeable cast, the kind of names that even someone living in a small town in the middle of America would recognize, even though they're not movie fans. So we're talking, I'm not getting Tom Cruise, but Tom Cruise, Gerard Butler, Jason Statham, all these names. I would put the names. I don't know why it had to be the manliest of action movies that I but I would make that list. I would also make a list of directors for the project, directors that have done things that are tonally similar, directors that have done things that are similar in scope or similar in concept, right? So I would make a list of all of those directors. And then once I have all those miraculous lists made and I can see all those names, plus who represents them, plus the people who work at those companies, I start to connect the dots a little bit, right? So I have the movie in my head, and ideally it would be that cast and that director and that production company, but there are many versions of that, right? And so I try to figure out if I know someone at any of those companies from the last 15 years of networking. And if I don't, then I cold call. And that can be really rewarding. It can also be rather stressful because depending on how quote unquote fancy that person is that I'm calling, I don't know if they're going to return my phone call, but that's kind of the game that we're playing, right? And that's the game that everyone is playing, whether or not they want to, is how much can I convince someone just based off a story that they should get involved with it, right? How much can I call them and give them the quickest of elevator pitches and why their company should be involved or why they individually should be involved? And that's what I do. So a lot of times the spreadsheet starts off and it's like, okay, I know 5 people. I know one person working at the actor-led company that would be a good acting choice for this. I know one producer that has a deal at a streamer that has been kind of looking for this kind of material. And I know, 2 directors that might be really good at this. I'm going to send it to all 4 of them and I'm going to see who bites. If none of those people bite and I need to start actually cold calling people, then that's what I'll do. It's not going to be the most effective of techniques. So instead of cold calling, I like to kind of connect the dots on social media, whether that's LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. I'll look up the people who I'm trying to reach and I'll see who are our mutual friends. It's getting harder and harder now that people are shutting down their social media, because I was always using it no offense to all of my friends on social media, but I often would use it as a connect the dots for business. And now that people are like not on them because they're not cool anymore, it's harder for me to figure out who to hit up to get that intro to that person that I want to reach.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's how I do it. I don't know how Sandra
I
does it.
honestly do it pretty much the exact same way. Where I got a lot of lists. I go through and it's a lot of homework. It's a lot of, yeah, exactly. Like seeing who, might be good on every different level. So I think our techniques are very similar. And I use social media the same way. Like it's, I say it's like low-key stalking. And it's really like it's reverse 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, where I'm a little less hesitant with cold calls. So I always look for introductions. I mean, you always do introductions first, and then you kind of get to the cold call, the cold email at that point. But it really is, it's the reverse lookup and saying, okay, well, this is the person ultimately that I want to get to, whether it's somebody's agent or manager, or that financier, whoever, and I go through their social media and I look and see like, all right, who do they know that I might know, or one or two people. I mean, thankfully, when you're in the business long enough, you can pretty much get to anybody within 1 or 2 people. And then, I'll take those people out, well, pre-pandemic life, and, do coffee or lunch and be like, hey,
Pick up the bar tab.
and exactly, schmooze them a little bit and, drink a lot of coffee and, and then, it always ends up being their idea when I'm like, yeah, I'm looking for somebody who's doing this. But so it takes time, and that's why so many projects in general just take so much time to do, because you do have to go through, you have to give people time to read, you have to give people time to talk, you have to have time to make deals. But yeah, it's a pretty I think we have very similar processes. So but
well, the parallel is not only similar between you two, but similar to the writing process in general, and finding someone to champion your project, right? It's just a constant chain of finding people until it gets made, right? And then if depending on the situation, then you got to find more champions to distribute it.
I was going to say, I feel like we're the first cheerleader on the squad, but we have to build a squad, right?
Right.
Like, that's all we're trying to do, is build an entire squad until we lift like the project into existence. If enough people believe in it, it will become a thing. That's the theory anyway.
Yeah.
Does it benefit you at all, of just from a writer's perspective? They make a lot of pitch packages today. Like that wasn't the thing 5 years ago, but now it is. Like writers are always making pitch packages and throwing, the faces of talent onto there for potential casting. Does that help at all with a project of like producers seeing vision for things? Like, is that something that you guys like?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I've been teaching a writing course at USC. It's the business of screenwriting, and we've done a lot of talking about pitching. And I know that it seems a bit counterintuitive to ask someone who's so great at writing to then do a completely different medium, like a visual presentation, or do well in the room, be charismatic, do a song and dance. It seems very harsh, honestly, to ask writers to be able to balance all of those different skill sets. But a film or a television show is a visual medium, right? And as someone who has sat in a lot of studio boardrooms listening to 6 different writers pitch in one day on the same project, it's hard to keep them all differentiated, and it's hard to stay awake for 30 minutes while someone is telling you a story from top to bottom. And I got to tell you, having a visual presentation, it's night and day. It really is communicating what that person's vision is in a way that their words cannot. And whether you as an individual feel like you're good at making pitch decks, or you feel like that's not part of a writer's job, there are so many other writers who are going to be competing with you for that same job, going above and beyond, using these beautiful visual decks, and you're just going to be left with the power of your story. And hopefully that's good enough. But I'm always a believer that more is better, especially if it's good quality. That is kind of the that's the one caveat, right? Because I've also seen a lot of really terrible visual presentations where, you know, the boxes don't line up and the picture quality is bad and
Right.
the picture content is questionable, and
It hurts the impression of the script at that point, right?
it does. At that point, it's a detractor. And so you really have to kind of figure out where your priorities are going to lie and if that is your skill set. If that is not your skill set, maybe you need to either teach yourself, hire someone, or leave that out and hope that your story is the best.
Yeah.
And do you like it whenever a writer in these visual presentations goes out and literally puts the casting faces of well-known actors into those places? I mean, that's your job. I mean, typically, that's what you guys do, but
Yeah. No, I don't mind at all, but it also depends on a taste level.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, you have to know, the writer has to be able to kind of psychically know what the studio executive wants in cast. The hint is they don't want some washed up actor who hasn't gotten hired in 10 years, but the person is what the writer pictures. That's not helpful. It needs to be like a sales tool.
That makes
And
sense.
I was going to say, like, you know, in regards to that specifically too, it helps us figure out the vibe and the tone that you're going for, whether it's cast or atmosphere of the project. It really helps, you know, like Beth is saying, get into, you know, your head as the writer a little bit. And I think I want to also add on a little bit too. It depends on where you are in your career as well. Because, and this is more, I think, for like also the TV side versus even like the feature side. I think, look, in every case, more is always better. But if you're at, you know, and should you all be wonderfully fortunate and work hard enough to get to the point of, you know, being able to go and pitch, you know, like a TV show, like, and you're in the WGA, then at that point, like, you don't want to be writing, especially on the TV side, you don't want to be writing the whole script. You want them to pay you to write it. But having that pitch deck is what's going to help you sell it to a studio or a network. And that's how you oftentimes will sell a show, particularly once you've hit like an established level, or you've hit a point where people trust you as a writer. You know, you've been staffed a few times, maybe you've had a couple independent features done, you know, and if you're at that point, then you want to be able to go in, pitch the studio and the network your project, and that pitch deck is going to say so much that you know exactly what this show is. And that's whether it's based on IP or your own original idea. You know what the show is, you have a vision for it, you have the tone, you have the atmosphere, you can answer any question about it inside out and backwards. And it doesn't even matter, like, you can establish that in 4 pages and you can establish that in 80 pages. And I've seen shows sell in both directions. And then ideally, they're paying you to write that script. On the flip side of it, when you're just starting out, you have to have scripts written to either sell as that, you know, spec pilot, or you need to have something that really just shows off who you are. And if, you know, once you're at the point of working with representatives, then they can get you in the room to do those pitches. And those pitch decks can really, really help sell with that on the TV side of things. On the feature side of things, you know, I do agree with Beth. I think it's really good to know that it's going to change the second you bring in a director, the second you start developing the script. So don't be super married to it, but enough that it can convey what your vision is, enough to convey like, hey, these are the characters, these are the tone, these are the world, these are the things. Especially, you know, like, and this sounds really horrible, but a lot of producers and executives don't like to read, even though it's literally our jobs. And so if you can have a deck that really just sings and tells you exactly what your film is, then they'll ask for the script, because now they're like really they're invested. It takes you to that next level. And so sometimes it's easier to just say, hey, if you have a deck, send it over. But also be aware of what your project is. Like, if you have a genre film, oh my God, go make a deck. Like, that really conveys everything. But if you have, you know, more of like a smaller drama, it might not be effective in that same way, because like, look, it's not going to be a big studio feature necessarily. So you're probably not going to be putting in pictures of The Rock as your star, you know? So it doesn't quite work that way. So you want the, you know, your writing and the characters to come across on the page, and that's the thing you want to see. So again, it comes back also to your personal goals for that project too.
Okay, great. We're gonna take a break in about 10 minutes, but I have one sort of meaty question that someone asked, and I actually would ask it too, even though I've been working in development for 21 years now, because I actually don't have the answer. How do you become a producer? If you feel that like you want to produce, like we all know like how you generally become a film writer, a TV writer, a novelist. How do you become a producer? How do you get yourself on that track?
So I actually, I was an actor in my early 20s, back before I realized what jobs were available to us in the rest of the entertainment industry. And I was on set and I actually dropped ice cream on the foot of a producer and asked that exact question.
It is so like that.
I think I was probably 23 and a little fearless when it came to asking people questions. And I promise I did not drop the ice cream on purpose, but it was fortuitous because I said, "What do you do here? Because it seems really important. You're not the
This is such a weird chain of events. I'm
First
riveting. Continue.
First, I ruined his shoes, and then I assaulted him with questions, including how do I get that gig? Is what I said regarding producing.
Right.
And he said, "You have to assist a producer," and I was very confident in myself at that point, and I said, "Oh, I can do that. I went to college, and how do I get that job?" And he said, "Well, find the UTA job list. It's a talent agency, UTA.
Right.
They have a little insider job list." And I said, "Cool." And he said, "And you probably should go work at an agency." And I said, "I've seen Entourage. I can do that." And then I literally went and did that exact track. I went and I got a job at ICM, which is a talent agency. And then I went and I assisted a producer. It's a weird business because some of the most intelligent people I've ever met choose this business, and yet we all have to go become assistants. So it's more of an apprenticeship, if you will, where you are literally kind of producing a movie when you are an assistant to a producer. You are in every single step of the process on every single phone call. So it really is a crash course, graduate level way into producing. And if you aren't in Los Angeles, or if you aren't somewhere where there are producers to assist, well, then I would recommend that you start thinking about what kinds of stories you would want to make. I would recommend trying to write, because I think everyone in this business should at least try to write something, just to know what the pain is and how to work final draft. And I would just recommend like trying to network and talking to producers and listening to producer podcasts and figuring out how everyone else got in, because it is a strange part of the business. And there are lots of people, I think, that we both know that didn't become producers until their mid to late 30s, coming from another industry. And a lot of times they did have to go back to being assistants, or they did have to work on spec with a producer to kind of learn the ropes.
Coming from another industry, another part of the film industry.
No, like another industry. I think we know someone who's now a producer who used to be a couple of people probably in music. Like, I don't know if they were musicians kind of on tour or whatnot, but they decided to pivot into film production.
But that first step is still like an assistant to a producer, in some way, shadowing a producer.
Yeah. I mean, I will say too, it's like a lot of other things in this business. I think everyone kind of has a different pathway as well. My pathway was a little bit different, but still was similar in a lot of ways. Where, and again, this comes back to what kind of producer you want to be. Like, if you want to be like, a financing producer, like you literally just need to have money or have contacts with money and start talking to people. Come from a wealthy family. But, generally speaking, to be a creative producer and do the kind of things that we do, I actually started doing it when I was 17 years old, and I started doing it in cable access TV. And I wasn't producing films per se. I mean, I produced little short things with my friends and whatever, but I honestly got my start as a TV producer in cable access, where I would literally go in and I would produce short segments for some of their news programming. I would produce stuff for everything from, political events, aerobic shows, music shows. I used to literally be like, I will go out and I'm like, I'm going to go out and get, an interview with this band who was coming through town. And I lived in central Massachusetts at the time. So like, this isn't exactly like film hub of the world. I mean, now it kind of is, but back then. And, I'd literally just show up at like our local like concert venues when some national act, and I would like bang on the door. I'm going to date myself. The internet was like kind of a thing, but not really a thing back then. So like, I couldn't just like look up like, hey, who does this? I literally would go up to the phone book and be like, okay, this is Universal Music. And I would call like their main hotline. And so that's where I got my start producing, was literally when I was in high school in cable access TV. So I was a TV producer really, really early on. And I did go to school for all of this. And I did do music videos, and I did, a lot of nonfiction stuff. My first jobs in this industry were in unscripted TV. And, but then eventually I was like, the scripted producing life is really the thing that I really wanted to do. And that was my lifeblood. And so I did. That's when I did something very similar to Beth, where I had a conversation with a very, very powerful, producer in this town that I was really fortunate enough to get like this one-on-one meeting with, and intimidated the hell out of me. And then I told him he was very intimidating. So I guess I still had some amount of, strength in my young 20s body. And, he did the same thing. He said, go to the agencies, go do that. And I was avoiding doing that because at that point I'd already been like producing, in unscripted TV for a while. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't want to be going back and doing doing the assistant thing again. But I did, and it was the best decision that I ever made. And so that went through, I did the assistant thing, in the agencies. I did it at a network. I rose through the ranks there. And when you're a network executive, you're basically a producer at the network level. And then I left and just started doing it. So all of that is to say, I think sometimes also you kind of just have to start doing it, but be educated in what you need to do and the kinds of things and the networking and how things get done and how this business works. Because really all you need to, produce even an independent film, $10,000 with some friends, is you just have to know how to put all that stuff together. Have to trust your creative instincts. You have to know how to find projects, how to find the people to work with. But if you know that stuff, you can go out there and just start doing it, but the assisting, the, education component, that stuff is really important because it's part of the education.
I love that.
That's great.
It's very much similar to the writing aspect of things. Is sometimes you just got to call yourself a writer and go out there. And
I always joke that like producing is like particularly in the feature side, TV side, it's a bit different because there are so many other levels in a way that you have to like break through, because it's still way more corporate through the studio system still. But on the feature side, like you can literally roll out of bed one day and be like, I'm a producer. And if you can figure out how to put everything together, find the money, make something and put it out in the world, like, you can self-distribute stuff now, in a way that you couldn't 15 and 20 years ago. And you can do that now. And so it's literally the one job where technically you can roll out of bed one day and be like, yeah, I'm a producer. But you have to still be doing it to legitimately be a producer.
Right.
It's the cliche phrase now, but like writers write. It's like, oh, okay, well, producers produce. So if you're producing something, then you're a producer, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm going to go on break with that little nugget philosophy. Let's take 5 minutes, 5:05. We will restart.
Nice back
Thanks,
here.
everyone.
That's that. All right.
Yeah. Ready? Hey.
I didn't move. Just kidding.
I just stared at the blank screen. Yeah.
Exactly.
I didn't move either. I've been looking through the 60 questions that we have in queue that
there's a lot of them. Yeah.
Bring it.
Yeah. I'm trying to kind of
Try to talk faster in general.
Rapid fire. No, I mean, but this is good. I mean, because it gets down into the weeds, of all this stuff. And I think that's That's what we just don't know. Like, I didn't know about the money thing, so.
Yeah, so everyone knows too, before we get started again, all our symposium town halls are podcasts as well. So we kind of rehash them a little bit, and then we put it on our podcast channel. So if you'd like to listen to them elsewhere and just don't want to look at video, because who wants to look at us, they are in podcast form now, at least a few. So we'll be staggering the release of others as we go, just so we know. I'll also drop the code for all attendees again.
Yes.
And I'm gonna find my copy for that so I don't have to rewrite it, while Ruth kicks us off with another question. Why not? Go ahead,
All
Ruth.
right. Awesome. I have personally a lot of questions, but I just feel like there's so many in here. Okay, so this is a question that has popped up many a time in the past with me talking to writers, is kind of this idea of a producer being able to steamroll a project forward, right? Like Beth, you mentioned earlier, if a producer loses passion in a project, it's probably never going to get done. And so if a producer, say, pushes a project forward into production, like you're able to pull together the attachments that you need, and the writer in this case is an unrepped writer, on the back end of that project, can a writer get a rep out of that whole system, out of that whole process? Is that something that you like, almost like dotting your I's and crossing your T's, by the end of, you steamrolling a project forward, can a writer end up with a rep at the end of a production getting pushed forward?
Absolutely. What they should actually probably get a rep right before we need to sign their deal and get them paid. Because if we have a project that's going, whether or not the writer has been paid up to that point, there's a financier on board once the movie's or once the TV show's actually going to get made, and it's time to actually pay the writer. When there is money to be paid to a writer, the chances of getting a rep are rather high, because you're coming with an automatic 10% of whatever that deal is that they're going to help negotiate. So agents love a sure thing, so do managers. And yeah, if you've actually got a project that's going and you've got a producer or anyone on board of clout, they will probably hook you up with a legitimate representative who can help with your finalizing of your deal contract.
Gotcha. And have you, I know, Sandra, you've said that you get projects from a variety of different ways, and Beth, you tend to come through a bit, maybe like managers and agents, those kinds of channels. So have both of you experienced working with unrepped writers? Is that definitely okay? That has happened. Okay.
Oh, absolutely. And with a couple of the projects, they've ended up with representatives either I am so sorry, my dog just lost it.
He's part of the cast here.
He has a very strong opinion about this as well, which is absolutely, it happens all the time. I've had a number of projects where the writers have gotten reps either during our process, through the process, and even after the projects have been released. And actually it helps, in a lot of ways strengthen the position. And I do know a lot of agents and managers. And again, they have their own ways of doing things and things they like to, look at. But, they oftentimes will only look at people who have had something produced or in the process of doing it, because it is, it makes their jobs a little bit easier in order to sell you. So again, that's a mileage may vary. Every rep is different, but there are some out there who are like that. But yeah, I've absolutely had that happen. I've had it happen with writers. I've had it happen with directors. I do work with a lot of first timers on both the writing and the directing side. And so that is a really common experience for people I've worked with.
And the reason I'm kind of asking along those lines is I've tended to push writers, out into the world. Like, you do not have to necessarily wait, to be repped or to find your agent or to find your manager. No. And I've always encouraged and said, you need to be, the go-getter or the first cheerleader essentially for your project. If you can get it into a producer's hands, you absolutely should, and I guess that's what I wanted to ask, like, from your perspective. as a producer, I mean, if an unrepped writer comes up to you, it's not necessarily you're just going to turn them away. I mean, you are looking for, I'm assuming you're looking at the type of project that's being presented to you, you know, if it really falls into your slate of creativity and what you're looking for in your pipeline, you know, like all of that factors into it, not just the unrepped factor of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a benefit to working with an unrepped writer. You don't have to deal with the representative. But there's also something to be said about being your own representative as a writer, because so many writers I know believe an agent or a manager to be the holy grail to write something.
There's just, yes, that's ideas out there.
Once I get an agent or a manager, the jobs will just come pouring in, and it's not true. And most of the time when you get an agent or a manager, you don't have any credits, you don't have any momentum, you don't have, you know, all of those relationships yet. And so it's going to be a bit of a runway before that agent or manager starts making money off of you. So a lot of times the manager or the agent will kind of primarily take the lead from you as the writer, as to what you're generating, as to the relationships that you have, as to what projects you can create on your own. So coming in with the mentality that no one is going to be a better agent or manager for you than you are is paramount to success. And like so many writers I know don't want to pay attention to the business of it. They don't want to know who the buyers are. They don't want to know what the buyers are looking for. They just want to write what they want to write. And that's totally acceptable. And this is an art form, but we are also trying to sell a piece of business that is an art form. So knowing who you're writing for, what kinds of buyers are looking for that, what kinds of TV shows are working these days, that's all so important, because you're going to need to be your biggest advocate.
Right. I like that.
Absolutely. And, you know, again, I think, you know, there's the twofold where, you know, and having, you know, myself worked with, you know, reps at various points in my career, you know, as assistants or partnered with them in different ways, you know, they want to see that you're hustling. Like, they can't advocate for you if you're not advocating for yourself. And a lot of times, you know, if you talk to them for the first time, they will say you're going to get your own first job, whether that's an independent feature getting made or getting staffed on a TV show. A lot of times it does come down to your own energy and efforts. That said, when I do work with unrepped writers, you know, for me personally, I don't just believe a lot of times in the project. I also believe wholeheartedly in that writer or that director. And I will go to hell and back for them. And so I, you know, usually probably against my own best interest as a producer, but I will introduce them to managers. I will introduce them to agents. I will introduce them to executives, because the more success that they breed, the easier it is for our project to get made, you know, on a very like selfish personal level, but also because just I throw my passion behind, you know, the people as much as the projects, and I want to see them do well, and I want to see them succeed, and I want to see them, you know, have a flourishing career. And so I will make those introductions, and some producers will do that and some won't. But, you know, I think you do have to be your own best advocate. And I think that's something that a lot of people do look for. And, you know, it's the only way you're going to really get things done, especially when you're just starting out.
It helps your reputation too, introducing good writers to producer friends or to other producer friends and to agent and manager friends. So, and vice versa, right? So I have a wild card question. I'm going to slip it in now. How do producers deal with rejection?
Sandra?
Like this.
That's like, I don't deal with it.
Silence and avoidance.
You know, you know, it's a very mixed bag. And especially, again, everybody is different. But
Sure.
for myself personally, you know, we're so used to rejection that I was just like, you know, move on to the next, go down the list. Are there some that are more disappointing and heartbreaking? Oh my God, yes, absolutely. Like all the time. But we get said no to so much, you know, and so do, you know, as you do as a writer, as you do as a director. And it just kind of comes with it. But it's having the perspective and the passion for what you're doing. And, you know, if you knock on enough doors, one of them is bound to open and say yes. And you just kind of have to keep knocking on the doors. And some people get really, really lucky and it opens up really early. And some people, it takes a lot longer. Somewhere you're going to end up in the middle. And as producers, you know, I try to keep that perspective, you know, when I'm, you know, going out there with projects and hoping I'll find the right people. Yeah, but you know, if it hurts, you know, it does. You know, you just kind of, you know, you give it a little bit to mourn, and you know, move on to the next one.
It depends. It depends on what kind of rejection, because there's the I'm going out with a new project and I've gotten all my ducks in a row and I think this script is great and I'm going to make these 30 phone calls and have to pitch this thing over and over and over again. And inevitably, there's going to be a percentage of people that don't get back to you, whether that's phone calls or emails or whatever. And I try to embrace it as a numbers game, like literally just an odds game, right? All you need is one yes. Right. So I'm going to take at least probably 29 no's or 29 ghosting or whatever. And you just can't give up, really. Like, okay, I didn't get a yes in those 30 emails or phone calls. I guess I got to widen the net and figure out another approach. There are a million different ways to make it all come together. So I just try to take a rejection as spurning me on towards more phone calls.
And you don't take the ghosting personally at all, I'm sure.
I do.
Oh, okay. All right, fine.
It's very different.
You hear that? People who have ghosted Beth Bruckner O'Brien, how dare you?
It's hard not to take it personally. Especially, I think I really only take it personally when it is someone who I've known for an extended period of time.
Right.
You know, when it's someone who I've gone to brunch with 3 times and how dare they not return my email? Something like that. If it's just a random cold call or a cold email and they don't call me back, then that's nothing because they don't know me. But it is hard when it's a small business. And I know that I am guilty of ghosting on some people. And often it's because I don't want to tell them disappointing news. I don't want to tell them I didn't like the script. I don't want to tell them we're not going to make that project. I don't want to. I try to at least take it in stride. But it's hard when it's someone who I consider to be close and they stop talking to me about a project.
Well, I would never ghost you, but I don't know why you would be reaching out to me. It should be the opposite. Please don't ghost me when I send you great material.
I won't. I love your material, Matt.
Hey, I only send you the best.
Yeah, I think,
anyway.
I think, I mean, when it's somebody that you know really well and they ghost you, that is a lot harder because, hey, we're friends, like, and we literally just saw each other last weekend, and you're not talking about the project. That's hard. But generally speaking, you know, I don't think it's too much of a bother. I have no problem telling people no, but usually it's more along the lines of I probably just haven't had a chance to read it yet. And now I just feel really guilty that I haven't had a chance to read. And so now I'm ghosting you. And I think to that, this is where, you know, some of the education comes up. It's super important that you follow up as writers, and it's super important we follow up as producers. And so, you know, if it's, you know, you sent us a script and it's been, you know, a month, 2 months, and you haven't heard from us, like, follow up. And, you know, because at the very, and look, you still might get ghosted, in which case I say always give it 2 to 3 follow-ups. And after that, if they don't respond, move on. Like that's plenty, because then they're really just not answering you. But you know, but at that point, then at least I can respond and be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, you know, life blew up, a pandemic happened, or I just haven't gotten to it in my read pile yet, you know, and I feel really bad. Or it's like, oh my God, I completely forgot about this project because I have a long list of things. You just reminded me, and oh shoot, I'm like, no, I'm going to go read it. So important, you know, it's really important to, you know, follow up. And I think that is, you know, one of the biggest things that we often do as producers, and I think often should be some of the biggest things you do as writers, once besides writing the actual work.
That said, don't follow up after like 2 days or
weeks.
Right, it's a good point.
You got to give someone at least 2 to 4 weeks to read something, and then after a month you can be like, yo, what's up, have you read that yet? And I can go, no, on it, will do tonight.
It's From our perspective, which I think is at least somewhat similar to like the manager
Yeah.
world and stuff, where you're getting a lot of material, and our finalists and winners and stuff send us new stuff all the time. A month goes by so fast.
So fast.
They'll ask you like, "Oh, have you read my script yet?" And I'm like, "They're following up already." And I look back and like, "Oh, they sent it in April of 1994,
Crazy.
some ridiculous amount of
Crazy.
time ago." And it just goes by fast. When you have a long list of stuff that you're doing, the days go by quick. And like
Yeah.
for the writer, the days are going by slow because like, all right, I sent my script to them.
Totally.
I can't wait to see what X, Y, and Z people say. So I get that, but there is a disconnect in terms of how fast time goes by.
absolutely. And I think, it's also worth noting and reminding, because I think because of that exact fact, like, as producers, when we have multiple projects already going, already in the works, things that we've already committed to, those are always going to be our first priorities. They have to be. Anything new coming in is going to be, unfortunately, the lower priority, unless it's coming in like you really owe some like agent like a real favor, and then you're like, oh shoot, I really got to read this, which happens. But it's kind of always kind of keeping that in the back of the mind, which is why we ask for like, hey, like give 2 to 4 weeks, because unfortunately, like reading your script, like it's not just the time commitment. That's time that we're taking away from our families. That's time we're taking away from, because probably during the workday, we're probably most likely not going to be reading it. We're going to be reading it at night. We're going to be reading it on the weekends. We're going to be reading it at the gym. And that goes for literally every exec in town. Like that's how we work, because the things that are in motion has to have that priority. And, that's one of those hard truths, I think, that we don't always talk about. And so, we have to, when we commit to that, like we're taking ourselves away from something else. And so that's why we ask for that kind of time. And also that's why it's important for you to follow up.
Yeah, things do fall through the cracks, legitimately. So, Ruth, we've gotten a ton of questions on IP, and I did want to spend a little bit of time on that. I know a lot of screenwriters are kind of moving into like writing fiction, writing nonfiction. Some of them aren't, but I think it's good to know like what the landscape really looks like now, and where do you think the landscape is going in terms of stuff that's getting made to IP versus original specs or original series that aren't written IP. And Ruth writes children's books, and she writes fiction as well. So she's really dialed into that side of the publishing world. I'm kind of getting dialed into the publishing side of things too. It's amazing to me how big of a gap there is between the publishing industry and the film industry. And I'm wondering, from your two perspectives, how do you come across IP? Is it, and when I say IP, I mean books, plays, short stories, Black Phone, which did phenomenally well, right? It was based on a short story, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know how they came across it, but we see so much stuff like that happening now, really in the last 5 years more than ever. How do you come across it? How do you find it? Are people submitting books to you, or book pitches? Are you finding it on your own?
All of the above.
A little bit of both, yeah.
All of the above.
All of the above. I honestly have been a book nerd for the majority of my life. My first job was in a public library shelving books. So I really do just love books. And I run through audiobooks all day long while I'm doing chores. I'll run on, I'll use either like the Los Angeles Public Library audiobook app, and I'll just look at what's popular, or I'll look at what's available now. And I tend to like thrillers. So I'll literally just read thrillers. And anytime I come across something that I think is interesting, I'll look up and see if the rights are available. But we also, I get the latest book that I actually optioned on A Quiet Street. That one was sent to me from a manager at Grandview. He sent me 4 books, and one of those was that. And
that was a client of theirs?
That was a client of theirs, but they actually have an agent that's dedicated to IP. So he just represents IP. He just represents books for adaptation to television or film.
Oh, I see. But
Yeah.
by the way, someone mentioned Black Phone was Joe Hill, I think, wrote the short story, which is Stephen King's son. So bad example. He might have access already to people in high places.
Nice.
Sandra, same
Yeah,
sort of thing.
It's all of the above, really. I have right now 4 projects that are based on IP. One, is a reimagining of a kids show, and that case, the creator of the show came to myself and my producing partner on that one. So which is super awesome. So like that literally like walked in the door to us. Others, I have 2 other projects that are short films that are that have done really well online and in the festival circuit that have been turned into features. So those are also pre-existing IP, which is really wonderful. I've optioned short stories, magazine articles. I'm constantly like building my own list of stuff, from books and literally anything I read and see. If my eyes touch it, it's like basically IP. I've worked with really huge authors on stuff. And I've worked, where maybe a director has optioned their book and, paid money for it and wanted to develop it and needed somebody to come in and finesse some of that. I've optioned, books myself, and
Mhm.
like Beth, I've had agents and managers send me things. So it really comes from literally every direction. And it's a
Someone,
combination of the 2 of incoming and chasing stuff.
yeah, someone asked too earlier. I can't find the question now, but I believe it was along the lines of what happens after you like a book. Let's say piece of fiction, it's published. You get in touch with the author or their agent or whatever. You get the rights to it. What happens next? Typically, are you finding a writer to adapt it? Are you shopping the book itself to get another producer on board or a studio on board?
You can do it any of those ways.
Yeah, I've done it all of the above.
Right. You can shop a book around as just a piece of IP to find the right partners, and then you can develop it together with them. Or you can bring on a writer and sell the idea of that writer adapting the book, depending on how fancy that writer's credits are.
Okay.
Or with the latest book, On a Quiet Street, I'm just having the author, who also is a screenwriter, adapt it herself, because I want her to capitalize on the writing as much as possible. So I don't really want like another screenwriter to come in and take away that power from her. So that's what I did on that one. But it all just depends on the momentum of the book, how much readership it has, if it's, something that would be best defined as film or television, and then you kind of divide and conquer from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. There are also some places too, and particularly on the TV space of things, where some want a writer or producer or director already attached to the IP and bringing it in, and some don't, because some want to be able to put in their own people that they trust with it, and they want to have say and control, so they'll just option the book or the article, the short film, or whatever that may be. So it does come from every angle. There was one I worked on recently in the past year where a director optioned a book. It's a true crime kind of thing, big public case that's still talked about in the media often, and book is great, and they wanted to turn it into a scripted series versus a docuseries. And because this person wasn't necessarily a writer, but he was very, very passionate about it, and he would put together, coming back to pitch decks, he would put together his own pitch decks for it, even though he hadn't written it. We then brought in a writer, a younger, like more emerging writer. He was a playwright and had just gotten staffed on his first show. So like in the, hierarchy of writers, still considered, I hate when we use the term baby writer, but a baby writer. And even though he's a full-grown adult male, and
not a literal baby.
Yeah, I saw you.
To be clear.
And they just really honed and refined that pitch deck. And then we went out and we pitched this as a package with the book. We had professional coverage done on it. We had the pitch deck. We had other supporting articles, you know, about this particular case, all of the information. So we had a whole, you know, little packet of things, but the thing we didn't have was the script. We had the pitch deck and we had the package of stuff. And that's how we would go out there and pitch that material. On other projects, we have, you know, say the book or the article, and we will have the script written, or we will have, you know, we'll bring somebody else in, or, you know, we'll just do it as just the book and we won't bring anybody else in. All that to say is it varies. And it really depends on where you want to bring it, who you're partnering with, you know, who you hope to partner with it.
Yeah.
And
So your goal is to sell the project. I mean, so however you interpret the best way of presenting it out there, I mean, that's what you're going to do as a producer. Right?
There's an art to that too, I'm sure, trying to figure out what
Right.
pieces you need
Yeah.
and what's going to be the most efficient, cost-effective way to do it, right?
Yeah.
That was actually the conversation I had with the author, because I asked her what her concerns were about just adapting the book in the entertainment industry for a television show or a film. And her concerns were mostly about time, because she'd had another project that was set up with another company and she hadn't heard from them for 6 months. And that's not unusual. These things take a long time, but time was a primary concern for her. So when we went through the timeline of what it would look like to attach a high-level writer who would have enough of a resume to impress a buyer, and then to actually negotiate the deal with that writer once we had a buyer, and then to actually get that writer on board to writing the adaptation, that entire process takes a year, right? No joke. Trying to find the person, get them to read the original material, get them to engage with the original material, take out the pitch, have the buyer do the negotiation with their agent, and then have the writer start writing. It takes a really long time. And so time was important to her. And she's one of the fastest writers I've ever met. And so she wanted to take it upon herself. She's not being paid for that yet, because it's speculative work. It's work that we're going to sell to a financier. But she was game to do that. And time was the precious commodity that we don't have endless time. That's not a good sense. You know what I'm saying? We don't she decided to write it herself. And that was just something that we had to strategize together, because you have to just make sure that everyone's priorities are the same, or at least that you're aware of everyone's priorities. Otherwise, that's where controversy happens.
Yeah, we've had not a great amount of luck taking out just the book only, whether it's fiction or nonfiction of late, which is why we're actually announcing our adaptation winners in a few weeks for the season, or winner rather. And we've kind of shifted there to like, well, instead, like, let's really help the author work on a script version of that book. Even if they're not a screenwriter and they have zero interest in it and they don't want to put the time in it, then fine, we'll just take out the book. Then they shouldn't do it. Absolutely. But like Ruth with Aaron last year, who won adaptation, Aaron Philip Clark, wonderful crime writer. Look him up on Amazon, buy his stuff. He won. His book was a crime drama, takes place in LA, very topical, felt fresh for the genre, yada yada yada. We worked with him for probably 6 months on getting that hour-long pilot in shape where we were confident and he was confident in sending it out. And then we got him repped a month or so ago, and all that worked out. But I don't know if taking out just the book would have really
done it,
helped in that case. So that's why I asked, like, it really does depend on the material. If it's some big high concept book that's already sold a ton of copies, maybe you don't need the script. Maybe it's better not to have the script in that case, right? In a way.
I will say one of the other projects that, I've been working on comes to both this specifically and with time. There was a book it was a nonfiction book that a writer friend had written. He is author and expert in many things. And he was actually somebody I hooked up with his manager, and we kind of became producing partners on this particular project. But he actually went out and sold the book just straight up.
Right.
I wish I could talk about the major companies right now, but they're, that's one of the places where, because of this particular author's expertise and this particular book and the type of, nonfiction that it is, they've actually been able to develop, the big production company that they did sell it to managed to develop it into 2 different TV shows. So now there's going to be a scripted version that will be on a major streamer. And
Wow.
there's also a docuseries version that will be on another major streamer. And that was a situation where they were able to just go out and sell the book. And because the production company that they were able to sell this book to, that production company was essentially the package, but they were the ones paying for the book. So they were able to go out and sell this book just as a book, and then bring in the partners. So that does happen. I also used to do a lot of work with, after I left FX, I did a lot of consulting work for AMC. And they're one of the companies too, where they often like to just option books outright without necessarily talent attached to it, because they like to bring their own people in. Not to say that, if you have something, they will absolutely do it with an attachment, but they often would just want the book. And, a lot of these companies, and, us even included, will get advanced copies of books. And, big, whether they're ranging from big to small, that we get to read a year sometimes before they come out. And the bigger companies have a lot bigger access, and every single major agency, management company, and even production companies have book agents that do nothing but work with their books. And how do we convert this from, the written word into a visual medium, and who can we pair this with, and who are the best places? And they can sell them direct to anybody. They'll bring them to producers, and every project is a little bit different. So there are some places that really do prefer to just take the book and just do that. And a lot of networks and studios will often do that, so they can bring in their own people.
Gosh, this could be a whole separate town hall of adaptations to film. It really could. I mean, it's such an important thing too, not just because the market is picking up so much IP. The market's always picked up a lot of IP, right? But I just see so many screenwriters at least exploring making the transition into writing fiction. A lot of them find that they're even better, and they like it. They like writing fiction sometimes more than film and TV writing. But I think it's a good skill set anyway to sort of look at. Someone asked too, actually, this would be my question as well. Beth, you mentioned that you would see if the rights are available for that particular book.
Search engine for that.
Yeah. How would you do that?
Well, first I would Google literally the name
Just
of
a
the
basic,
book.
yeah.
Yeah, the name of the book plus the word film or television show. And then if I can't find anything there is a website called rightscenter.com that is a subscription website that shows where the rights have been optioned, and it'll often give you the name of an agent and or the publisher, or even sometimes the author themselves. And it's kind of a bit of a stalking internet search from there as to who will be able to talk about whether these rights are available or not.
Maybe Done Deal probably would. You could search by a book title and it would come up.
I don't know Done Deal. That's
Done Deal Pro. Yeah, it's where all the spec sales and stuff go. Am I dating myself? The site's been around so long. I'm like, is there anything else out there to track?
I'm familiar with that, but yeah, usually I think Right Center is the typical go-to.
Right Center.
Okay.
For the studio system.
I asked too, because there's writers out there that may want to, they read a book and they're like, I love this. I would love to adapt it on spec or work with the author on it, and they can just go option it themselves, right?
Absolutely. And if all else fails, I've tracked down authors on social media. I've tracked down authors by subscribing to their fan list and then replying to the no reply and getting a reply back. I've tried every avenue.
Oh yeah.
When I can't find them.
You have to be innovative whenever you're in a producer's shoes. I mean, in order to connect to people.
Exactly. And if a writer ever does want to actually option some material and try to adapt it, they are a producer at that point as well. They are a writer producer. If they found that material, they can feel secure calling up that author and saying, I am a producer in Hollywood and I would like to write the adaptation of this, and I will give you my time and my energy and see what the person says. Because as we talked about earlier, someone's time and energy can be the boost that the project needs to get made.
You would be shocked how many authors will get back to you and at least open up a conversation.
Yeah,
completely.
Even ones that have been published with Simon and Schuster and Penguin and Hachette, you know,
Definitely.
because especially if they're a newer author, because a lot of those big publishing houses, yeah, they got published by them, but they're not really paying attention to them, sadly, right? They're paying attention to the bigger authors of the world, right?
That's right.
I almost dropped some names, but I don't like drop some names. You know who the bigger authors are. So yeah, I would encourage, just a side note, I would encourage writers, if they're really interested in a book or a piece of property, don't be hesitant to reach out.
Yeah.
Does that make it more attractive then if a writer comes up to you and pitches something through whatever means, and they say, hey, there's this book out there that sold really well, I've adapted it into a feature, that has to be a little bit of a boost because it has
Only
that.
if they have the rights. And
Only if they have the rights, correct.
because there's a lot of writers that I've encountered who are like, yeah, I've adapted this, but they don't actually have the rights to do it.
That's a good point.
And you have to, and one of the most important things we do as producers is making sure that chain of title is clear. And so what that means is that ownership is clear, meaning that like you as the writer own that. If you are optioning material, that person has all the paperwork and has, you know, the rights to use that. And it doesn't matter if you've paid $0 or $1 million, as long as you have to have that paperwork in order. And so as long as the rights are clear. So if you come to me as a writer and you're like, hey, I've adapted this book, the first thing I'm going to ask you is, do you have the rights for that? Like, do you have that relationship with that author? If you do, awesome, let's talk. If you don't, I can't even engage with you.
Right.
That opens up so many other cans of worms. So that's really, really important. And I do encourage writers to go out there and option material that you love, and you can do it for, depending on the author, you can get it for very little money or no money.
If nothing,
For and some, you know, like I know, particularly like if you're a student, like Stephen King literally has a program where you can option his stuff for like no money and adapt it. And, you know, like, I think even like music wise, if you're a director, like Moby does something really similar. So there are ways to do all of the things, or, you know, or you just really flatter the author and they're like, yeah, you're really cool. And you want to put in that time and sweat equity. The nice thing also about having the right paperwork is that even if a studio, network, whoever else, or, you know, producer decides to bring in another writer to either hopefully work with you or mentor you, if not, they're like, no, we really want someone else to do it. Just because you have the paperwork, you're still a producer on it, you still have ownership, and you still have the right to decide what to do with that project. So it's super valuable for you as a writer, and also super valuable for you as a, you know, budding producer.
Right. But if you have a sketchy chain of title, that could kill you.
That could ruin everything.
Yeah. It's, a few people asked, so I might just throw it out there. When someone submits something to you, are you having them sign an NDA?
Not an NDA, but a submission release form.
Submission release form. Okay.
Yeah. So there's, you know, two sides to that. I don't have anyone sign an NDA. That's weird. There's no reason for me to have them sign it. But I will have them sign a submission release form if I don't know you and it's a totally cold thing. And it just basically protects both sides, acknowledging that, hey, you're sending this to me. I may have other things in development that maybe have similar ideas, tones, names, whatever.
Right.
But you're still sending it to me, and you acknowledge that that is possible. And it protects me because we have a record of all of that happening. On the other side of that, if a writer asks me to sign an NDA form, that's a red flag immediately. I will not sign it, and I will not engage with that writer anymore because it shows me that you don't understand the industry and how this business works. I have no interest in stealing your ideas. There's so many ideas out there, and there's so many similar ideas, you know? And so if you're like, well, I can't let you read it until you sign an NDA, like I have no reason to do that, and it just shows me that you don't understand how things work.
Ruth, I think this is the first town hall when no one asked about the theft of ideas. I think maybe finally people understand that it's
I know I've been scrolling questions and I haven't
all.
seen that yet, which is pretty incredible. I do have one more bigger topic that I wanted to touch on, but before we do that, Beth, did you wanted to add anything into the NDA discussion?
No, you know, I should have people sign submission forms, but I don't accept submissions from strangers. I need someone to have either send it to me who is a mutual friend, or very occasionally I will allow a writer to send something if the logline intrigued me and if they have their lawyer send it.
Got it. Okay. All right. So the other big topic that I've been seeing scrolling through questions is this idea of financing. So yeah, so we have writer directors who maybe they're taking their own project out. We have them asking, how do I find financing? How do you find financing as a producer attached on the thing? I mean, that's really what elevates, right, a project from just being a concept to actually getting onto a production set. I mean, is this idea of financing. So where do you guys find it? How do you attract financiers? Where are these financiers? I mean, is there like a secret Facebook group we don't know about? Like where are these people?
Ooh, Sandra, you want to take that?
Oh, I got a long-winded answer. You go first.
My answer is terrible. You know, the difference between an independent film and a studio film is just that the studio signed on earlier in a studio film. Even in an independent film, if it's getting distributed on Netflix or, you know, HBO or whatever, that company eventually signed on to distribute it. So I will go to the established buyers in the business first. I will go to big companies that have financing through a streamer, through a distributor, and normally we will find financing for a project that way. I have yet to find the sort of independent financing where I could go make $1 million movie with someone's money who, you know, grew investments in Minnesota. I have not done that. I have a feeling that day will be coming soon. But if that is the case, I will probably need to ask a lot of mutual friends for introductions, because I am not aware of the secret financial group of investors. Someone please let me know that address if it exists.
Some producers I know, they won't tell you who the financier is, right?
We are all very cagey about those things.
Yes.
And
your investor.
Yeah, Beth, tell me later. Because I have done that $1 million, you know, independently financed movie. And I've also done stuff through the studio system. And, you know, the long and short of it is literally money can come from anywhere. So to address particularly the writer directors in the group, find a producer to work with, because you do not want to be the person doing all of the things. And your job, look, you've written the script, that's done, right? So you've done your job as the writer until you get to like rewrites and production. As the director, when you get to the point of pre-production, all of your energy needs to be on directing and making this movie the best movie that it can be. You do not want to be making logistical decisions. You do not want to be worrying about how every little dollar is being spent. You don't want to be worrying about how this actor is eating. You don't want to worry about these things, because that is not your job. Your job is to direct the film, because if that film lives and dies by you. And that depends on your distribution. That depends on who's going to, the reviews you get and things. Your attention needs to be on directing at that point. So you need a producer. So I would say find a producer, and particularly producers who, are collaborators. Find producers who also have access to financing. And that is always a tricky part, because you don't always know who that is going to be.
Right.
Do your best. So that is what I will say to writers and, writer directors, is find a producer to work with. Do not be the sole producer on that. It gets to be very, very difficult. There's also, there's crowdfunding, there's asking family and friends for money. It depends on your budget range. That said, it all still depends on your film. So I have projects where my first stop will be studios, large production companies, same thing Beth is talking about. And I'll try to go to them first, because, go to Netflix, go to Amazon, because you get that money right there. You got your producing partners, you're good. But, most movies don't end up doing that way. We all piece together financing in different ways, and there's so many different types of financing. Ideally, in a perfect world, you get to have private equity, and that's when people literally hand you checks. It's in the bank, it's actual cash, and you go make your movie. And oftentimes those do come from a friend of a family, somebody a real estate agent in the middle of, Minnesota who just really likes the idea of it. I've seen, a director on one of my projects went on to partner with literally a guy she met at the airport, and he liked the idea that she was a writer director and now finances all of her films,
No.
basically privately, so they can still go make things independently. Meanwhile, I can guarantee that you guys have seen some of her movies. And so that does weirdly happen, and you can't predict that. But if you happen to have those connections, awesome. There's always a joke that like dentists are like the people to go to because they have a lot of expendable income. It's not, and it's not a glamorous job, and they like the idea of a little bit of glamour. So go hit up your dentist.
Apparently dentists are like some of the biggest investors in film, which is something I've heard.
the same.
Yeah.
Strangely.
No, I have yet to find one of them, to be honest. Like I've tried, like I've literally gone to my dentist who tells me about going to Sundance, and I'm like, so do you wanna,
You gotta start going to more dentists.
Yeah. But it's all over the map, and it's talking to people, and it's networking, and it's going to local film festivals, because you might find somebody there who's just really passionate about film and has a lot of expendable income. So there always is that. The other side to it too is getting to know sales companies, financing companies, distribution companies. They tend to also want to put in money. They want to control the projects earlier in the process. So if you do have like that proof of concept short film and it happens to be a horror film, there are absolutely financiers and distributors out there who, if they love this stuff, like they're going to put in money for it. And some of that might be equity, some of it might be what they call pre-sales, which is when they go to other countries and other what they call territories that they kind of group together, countries and areas, to pre-buy the film. And if you have good artwork and a good trailer from, a short film, they will just outright pay for it, and then they'll put it on their local streamer, theater, DVDs, whatever. So that's one way of doing it. There are debt financiers. You probably want to avoid that, but sometimes you can't help it, which basically means that, somebody is putting up money, and, which is usually how it works, but they put up a bunch of money, they pre-sale a lot of stuff, and then they, take it all back before you really get to do a lot with it. There's a lot of different ways. So ideally you do, and if you're a budding producer and, a writer who's looking for a good producer, find people who know what they're talking about, and to have partnerships, so like what Beth was saying, when she's putting together a project, and I do the same thing. I go through and I look through similar films, and I look at, like, who are the producers, who are the financiers, who are the other people involved with it, and you look for people to partner with. So as writers, as you're looking for producers, go through IMDb, go through, the credits of your favorite movies, go through the ones that are similar in tone and vibe, that are recent. You don't want to go too far back, and see who is there. And then, internet stalk them. Do they have, Twitter that they're, open to chatting with? Do they accept cold submissions? Some do. Financiers can be the same way. Some of them are really active in these social media spaces. Some of them, we'll talk about it to, no end. Some won't. But again, it's just talking to people, getting to know people. When you're at that point, as a producer, that's what I do, is like, I'm like, hey, I'm looking for financing for this film, and I have to be very specific in my ask. And so I say that to writers too: be very specific in what you're asking for from a producer in terms of reading, or what you're looking for in a producer. Because if you're just looking for a producer to go find you money, great, then find that producer, but that won't be me, because that's only part of what I do. And if you don't want my creative input and collaboration, then we're probably not going to be a good fit. So those are all things that you have to look at and consider. And so in terms of finding money, it literally can come from anywhere. And if your project is $100 million action film, then you need to pair with producers who have access to those studios and to those companies who can, find the star power, who can put those things in. If your script is a small independent drama that you can do for $10,000, go find a family member, go crowdfund, go find the way of doing that. And then, there's plenty of ways to get it out into the world, whether through distribution or, self-distribution or whatnot.
Yeah.
There are ways to do it.
Someone asked a question, and they're just to, if you both want to just kind of clarify. So if you're a new writer or a new writer director, you have a really good script, what do they need before they submit to a producer? They don't really need an entertainment attorney, right? They don't need, I mean, obviously if they adapted it from somewhere, they should have that agreement in place, of course. They don't need a rep necessarily, right? You might take a submission more seriously if it's coming through a rep, or that writer is repped, possibly. But if it's a script that I've sent you stuff before where the writer's not repped, and Beth and you've loved it and ran with it, and does all that stuff matter besides just having the really good script?
Yeah, I guess for the sake of the title, what a producer actually wants from a writer.
Yeah.
So what would
do you
be your
want,
list
Beth?
of things? What do you want, Beth? What do you want, Sandra? What do you want from a writer?
Ooh. I want them to have written a good script. I want them to be collaborative. I want them to be open to notes. I want them to be open to changes. I want them to know that it's going to be a long road and that they're going to need to do some work too. Yeah,
It's pretty simple at the end of the day.
It's pretty
in a way,
simple at
right?
the end of the day, except it's really complicated.
Right.
It's when you put a necessary level of quality on everything that makes it difficult, right? Because we say we want a good script. I've read like 10,000 scripts in the last 14 years. So it's going to take something that's really fresh and unique and well crafted to get my attention. And then I want you as the writer personally to be personable and smart and not too precious about your work, and you know, to be a good, fun person that we can spend the next 5 years pushing a rock up a hill trying to get this film made together. That's what.
Yeah. And I mean, it's really, you know, it's basically a similar, you know, response to what I have, which is, you know, great script. That's really all you need. If we get to the point of, you know, needing a lawyer, I'll tell you to go get a lawyer. So I don't need you to have one. Ideally you don't, because that makes negotiating way easier for me. But really you should have a lawyer at any point, but you don't need it to send it to us. But that said, collaboration is extremely important, you know, and, you know, to be able to be open to ideas, you know, like our goal is to work with you to make it the best script it can possibly be in a way that we can get it financed or sold and made for you. And for us, you know, it is teamwork. And so, you know, being open to discussion, open to new ideas, about saying not being precious with every little thing. I think it's really important that you have your own individual voice. And I do think you should have strong opinions, but open to listening to expertise. And I think that's one of the problems I run into, particularly when I work with first-time writers, is that you get very married to your opinion, or you're very married to a particular way in a script, or you think you understand how the business is run. And if this is your first time doing it, and even second time doing it, you probably don't. And, you know, when we've been doing this 20 years, and so we want you to trust us, and trust that we're working for you and we're working, you know, as a team on this project, and that we love it. But, you know, it's being firm in your opinion, but at the same time being open and collaborative and listening to people who actually have been there, done that, and understand what they're doing. That doesn't mean you need to agree with us on everything, but it should be a discussion, and everything shouldn't have to be a fight or an argument. And good collaboration, it's usually not. It's usually, you know, teamwork and discussion. So that's what I look for. And if I get any hint of otherwise, I don't care how good the script is, I will walk away. Just because
Me too.
we live with it. We live with this for so long, and our, you know, hopefully this project gets made, and then our financial futures are tied in together, no matter how you look at it. So there has to be those levels of trust. There has to be those levels of collaboration. And if I think that I get any hint of trouble with it, then it's not worth it.
Yeah. Right.
Life's too short.
Yeah, the best writers I've found are confident without being arrogant, and they have very, very strong opinions, but are open to feedback
Totally.
creatively. It's that nice Goldilocks balance. So, hey, look at that. We timed this perfectly. It's been 2 hours. We could talk for 9 days. Biblical proportions we could talk for, but this has been wonderful. Thank you both.
Yes,
For,
Thank you.
Yeah.
No,
Thank
this
you
is
for
super
having
fun.
us.
Thank you for having us. Exactly.
You're very welcome. We take tips. Hey, guest tipping us? It's a new concept. Let me pitch it to you. No, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. We'll have the podcast version available probably in the next few weeks. The recording will be on our channel, Bruce, by
Yes.
next week.
Yeah, so
not this week.
the video should come out. It's usually out within 48 to 72 hours or whatnot following the event. I would also like to mention that next week we are also having another symposium event on Wednesday, October 26th, with some of our in-house symposium experts. There are 2 editors and screenwriters in the pipeline community, Abigail and Laura, and they're going to be giving us the ultimate pitch toolkit, everything that you need to check off of your list before you send it to a producer like Beth and Sandra. It's just so they love the pretty presentations, and we're going to give a nice little checklist of things that you can have in your toolkit ready to present on that front. And I think that'll be really valuable. So anybody who wants to check that out, that is next week, Wednesday, October 26th. Beth, Sandra, thank you again for this. Was just a tremendous amount of knowledge on the producer side. I love being able to step into y'all's shoes just for a 2-hour time period. And I know it's not even fully in your shoes. It was really awesome. So thank you for all that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sandra, for joining me.
Thank you, Beth, for having me. Thank you. No, honestly, thank you, everyone. It's always fun to talk about this, and
Yeah. We'll do this again in 2023. I'm sure a little
Yeah.
mini town hall session. We'll
Have you
mix
guys
it up.
back after the release of your next film? Whatever crazy.
Make
That
it
would
sound
be
like we're
lovely.
not toiling alone.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Right. Oh, and a quick mention, Beth is actually going to be doing a symposium presentation for us in November, on November 15th. So we
Sure.
actually have that up on our website, a development checklist that she's going to be going through for those writers out there also interested in what producers are looking for in that checklist. So check that out as well. And I think that's everything. Are we good?
We're good.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Stop
Thanks all.
recording and
Thank you very
sign
much
off.
for that.
Thank you guys.
All
Have a
right.
good
Thanks
night.
everyone. All right. Bye-bye.